Welcome, guys, to the last day of the FinTech Festival. I have the privilege of being able to ask Balaji anything. And I think you guys can too. There's going to be a QR code perhaps presented. You can scan it, type in your questions. Don't swear. There's someone at the back filtering your profanities, and then I'll be able to ask. But Balaji loves to talk. I've listened to hours of your podcasts and I've read some of your 25,000 tweets over the past decade. You talk on geopolitics, education, healthcare, crypto, blockchains, the future of work, and all of this wonderful stuff. So to warm up, everyone knows you as Balaji. How do you pronounce your last name?
You can just call me Balaji, but the last name is Srinivasan. SRI is not in the English language. So,
Srinivasan, yeah. Good answer. How old are you?
43.
Where'd you grow up?
Long Island, New York.
College?
Stanford.
Favorite food?
I gotcha. Water.
What's your favorite color? Red, blue, or gray?
I'll go with gray.
Go with gray. Who gets that in the audience? Okay, you need to spend more time listening to Balaji's broadcast. Yeah. Why did you move? You live in Singapore, right?
I live in Singapore, yes.
How long?
Almost 4 years now.
4 years?
Since
Why did you
early
move?
2020. Well, early actually, I'd always wanted to get back out to Asia. India was an attraction, Asia more generally an attraction. And then early, before people acknowledged that COVID was actually a thing in the US, I realized that there was no group of guys, like in the movies, Contagion or something like that. There's a group of guys in the US government, when things get tough, they come out and they fix everything, and there's guys in sunglasses, men in black.
I've seen those movies.
You've seen those movies, we've all seen those movies. Once I realized in like January, February 2020 that was just in the movies and did not exist, there was no reserve of competence there, and there was absolutely no floor to where I could get. I was like, okay, that's the movies. In real life, what's the most competent government in the world? It's the Singapore government.
Definitely.
So I came here. Right?
Definitely here.
So that's why I came.
Awesome. And what is your purpose in life?
I've actually got it at the top of my Twitter bio, which is immutable money, infinite frontier, eternal life.
Immutable money, infinite frontier.
Eternal life. So what does that mean?
Eternal life.
Immutable money is like, it's Bitcoin, and it's everything that Bitcoin represents in terms of sovereignty and freedom and all that kind of stuff, which is a PhD thesis, but I'm just, infinite frontier means actually reopening the frontier so that we're exploring space again. Maybe we're exploring the sea, we're doing the cloud countries I talked about in the network state. We're basically starting not just new companies and new currencies, but new cities and even new countries. And then eternal life is actually, just like everybody sort of sees how much the SEC in the US has held back crypto, and how much taxi regulations held back Uber, and how self-driving regulations have held back self-driving, and so on and so forth. Just as everybody sees that, well, the FDA is held back biomedicine by generations. And so if we get that new frontier, if we get that new place, that new space, then we could actually have the FDA, post-FDA zone, where it's not no regulation, but it's better regulation than FDA, in the same way Bitcoin is better monetary policy than the Fed. So that's what eternal life will get you, is basically if you get rid of the FDA, if you have a better thing than the FDA, you can actually approve all these treatments and drugs that have not been allowed. And Ozempic is just like the start of that. There's like 50 other things that you could potentially do. So go ahead.
Fantastic. There we go. So follow Balaji's Twitter. Let's talk a little bit about the network state. I've got a bunch of questions here on the network state. I've got to read them. You describe the network state in a tweet, in a sentence, in a blog post, in a paragraph, in a book, and in a kind of 2-hour presentation. You recently came back from Amsterdam, where there was a whole conference.
Huge conference, yeah.
How many people?
It's like about 2,000 people. Yeah.
About 2,000. There's a lot of interest in the network state. Is this something that sits alongside nation states, or is the idea, do you think they become more, firstly, what are they, and then do they become more powerful at some stage than nation states? How does it work?
I think a good analogy is fiat to crypto is fiat country to crypto country, right? And so that's, if 15 years ago, 10 years ago, in fact still today, for many people, the thought that you could, quote, start your own currency was an insane concept, right? How would you go do that? Would you go to the World Bank and the IMF? Would you have to win an election, and it's going to be decentralized and cryptographic? Like, it was violating so many different things at the same time. Oh, we don't have any monetary policy. It's all just encoded in an algorithm. It was changing like 15 different variables from the current system, and you can't usually do that, right? You can edit the current system on one thing or another thing, but you can't systemically change it and put it over here, unless you figure out the right way to do that.
But now
you can, right? So Satoshi used the internet to reopen the frontier, to build immutable money, right? And now hundreds of millions of people have essentially migrated to that. It's almost like imagine you lived in the US and there was a country with a sane monetary policy across the border, and you could drive over there and store 1% of your money in that country's banks, right? That's what it means to have like 1% or whatever your assets in Bitcoin. It's like hedging in a different country's monetary policy. Blockchains are in a sense digital governments. They give property rights and contract law and dispute resolution. So that's just half though. Blockchains are the digital half. How do we do the physical half? And the constant network state is sort of completing. It's the other part of that, right? It's saying we have these gigantic online communities with hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in cryptocurrency collectively, whether you call them DAOs or even discords that have them, right? And could they crowdfund territory, not just in one place, but all around the world? And just like Bitcoin's a decentralized currency, the network state is like a decentralized country. Okay, that's the concept.
And one question I've always wanted to ask you, now that I have the opportunity.
Sure.
So, cryptocurrencies exist. They've existed for a decade plus, but they exist despite regulators or alongside with regulators, and regulators are trying to figure out how to deal with them.
Yeah. So I think it's like, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, no. So there's some tension there, and we've heard it throughout this whole conference, and now people are talking about stable coins, tokenized deposits, deposit tokens, and all the rest, CBDCs, all the rest. In the physical world, though, you can still be in your discords, you can have these network states, but you're still a physical human being living in a physical place. You are in an office block, and they are subject to the nation state's police. Nation state has a monopoly on violence typically, and if they don't want you doing your discording stuff, your nation state stuff, they can still put an end to it.
Well, they're not all powerful, and in fact, the state is also not a unitary unit, and it's not just the state. There's many states and so on. But at a very, very high level, many governments, smart governments, will trade power for money. In the sense, for example, the total state that Mao built in China, Deng Xiaoping reduced the level of power, in a sense, but got more money, more prosperity for the people. He decentralized a good chunk of the power from the government. I mean, you could be executed for being a capitalist in 1970s China. And you can read about this. There's a good NPR article that just summarizes it, like the secret document that transformed China, the Zhao Gang, kind of thing that Deng allowed. But basically, that's a trade-off that you can make, less power for more money. It's the same trade-off at a micro scale when a startup CEO decides to get acquired by a large company, less power but more money potentially, right? And of course you can go in the other direction. If you're doing sanctions or tariffs or trade war, you have less money perhaps but more power, right? You're making a sacrifice of sovereignty. So these are dials that you can tweak, and there's no one answer, just like, a steering wheel is left or right.
It's not a binary outcome.
It's not a binary outcome.
Symbiosis, yeah.
Exactly, that's right. Or it's steering. It's not, the destination is not the direction you need to be able to steer. What's my point? The point is that crypto is like that, where there are countries that are willing to have less power to create more wealth for their citizens, right?
Yep.
And there's governments that want to take the opposite kind of role, and we're going to see the whole spectrum. And one of the big things is the bigger and more centralized the state in general, DC and Beijing, are probably going to be more antithetical to crypto. They are. Whereas dissidents within those places, like Chinese liberals or the out-of-party power in the US, right, American Republicans, and then also small countries, which are sort of dissidents with respect to the world order, like El Salvador and Palau and Bhutan and places like that, they still have sovereignty, right? So everybody that's not essentially aligned with DC or Beijing, I think eventually comes into the crypto category because it gives them sovereignty that the USD and RMB do not.
Don't want to be. Got it. Okay, here's a question from the audience, from Jonathan Yevon. How many current network state projects are there? And which are the most successful or noteworthy? So does this concept even exist, and who's
Great
winning?
question. So go to thenetworkstate.com/dashboard. You can see a dashboard of projects. But even better, go to YouTube, the Network State channel, and our Network State podcast channel and look at the Network State live stream, okay? It's actually, I'll retweet it and I'll do a blog post on it. But if you watch those 40 videos, they're short. They're all like 5-minute, 10-minute TikTok-style videos by Gary Tan, Vitalik, Antony is the founder of Solana, the Winklevosses, basically a bunch of people who are famous that you know, and a bunch of people who are not yet famous who are building these kinds of things. So what are some good projects? There's Prospera, which is building a city or a set of cities in South America. There's Cabin, which is doing this in Austin. These projects have hundreds or thousands of people already. Cabin has like 4,000 people. It's like crypto, I don't know, 2011, 2012, crypto before the big breakout year of 2013. So there's a bunch of projects. There's VibeCamp, there's Metacartel, which is getting a place in Costa Rica. There's Cul-de-sac, which has built a little city in Arizona, or a town in Arizona. It's a car-free city. And so there's actually many more of these projects than you might think, where people have gotten online communities and crowdfunded territory offline and started co-living together. There's a neighborhood, SF in San Francisco. There's Fractal in New York City. So people do it both within cities and outside cities. There's many different models. But the fundamental thing that's in common is people are realizing that you can essentially, just like you can declare yourself CEO of a new company, you and who, right? Like you and just your business card, but then you build a company. You can declare yourself president of a digital community.
Are you going to do that?
We'll see.
Vote for you one day.
We'll see. President of the network state. I want there to be lots of presidents of lots of network states, right? So the point is decentralization. But basically, what is a mayor? What is a governor? What is a president? They're basically somebody at the top of an org chart of thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people.
They can have their own currency and...
Yeah. So what we have is we have online capitalism with cryptocurrency. We can also have online democracy with crypto voting, where you could have people vote on chain. Just like they transact on chain, you can vote on chain for somebody, signal that you will support this person. Maybe it's episodic, maybe it's a fixed vote for 12 months or 24 months. You're supporting this person over that time. And everybody can see around the world, just like you can use a blockchain to see that this money was transacted, you can see this person has a base of political support of hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and they're all real people because they're all, your name.
Identity.
They've got identity.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all the primitives that we've built over the last 10 years, where you have identity and you have staking and you have hundreds of millions of people with cryptocurrency, you only take a subset of them if you can get, this is the thing, this movement doesn't have to be, quote, mainstream. That's something that people always mistake. Only 4% of the world is in the United States. That changed the world, right? What percentage of the world did Google? That changed the world, right? So if you had 0.01% of the world, which is like 800,000 people, and you could align them online to crowdfund territory offline, you could absolutely change the world, right? And again, it doesn't have to be all in one place. It can be scattered around the world, just like the Google offices are scattered, just like there's a Starbucks over here, and you've got a multinational REIT that owns territory around the world, but the same logo and the same badge that unlocks the commercial real
branding.
estate.
The
branding.
sense of togetherness.
Exactly. So that's done for commercial real estate now. Yeah. There's a Hilton everywhere, Starbucks everywhere, Google offices everywhere. What if you extend that conceptually from commercial real estate to residential real estate? There's nothing that's technically impossible about that, right? So you have your tribe living around the world, and you're together online, but you're distributed geographically, and that's the opposite of where, for example, the US is, where it's separated digitally. People are in totally different social networks, but they're packed
on the
together.
Same social network, but like not listening, not following
that's
the
right.
same people.
So exactly, they're either on the same social network but different subgraphs, or they're in completely different networks like Mastodon and Blue Sky and Gab and Parler and Truth Social and whatever over here, or Threads. People are in different social networks. They're not even talking to each other. Their cognitive secession has already happened, but they're like packed in the same room as a cage match for WWF. The alternative to that is people who are aligned digitally, who are all part of the same Discord or online community or DAO, but they're distributed physically around the world in territory that looks like lots of Hiltons or Starbucks or Googles or REITs or Chinatowns or little Indias around the world. But imagine if all the Chinatowns or all the little Indias were networked together, right? That's totally possible with today's technology. And then your tribal card, your digital passport, gets you into that neighborhood, right? And this is actually, in a sense, your passport gets you into a country, but only gets you into a small percentage of the country. You know why?
It's like my Hilton points, isn't it? I go to a different country and I know what it's going to be what it's going to look like.
That's right. And the reason for that is, if you let's say you have a passport to enter the US, okay? That actually only gets you street level access. You can go and walk around and you can go to the stores on the street level. But if you look at all the buildings in New York and you point at one window and you say, can I enter that window with my passport? You can't. You need a second passport. You need to get the hotel key card to go up to that floor and look out that window, right? Or you need somebody who has that office lease. You have to pay the lease and go up that way. So actually 90-something% of the city is visible.
Unavailable.
But it's unavailable, exactly. So that's a non-obvious point that actually we already have that second level of passport within a country, and that is your access to the offices and buildings and living spaces. Only whatever percent, 10, 15% is actually public space. Most of the rest is behind a login wall in a sense, right? And so once you kind of lean into that, you're like, oh, okay, that's how the physical world is kind of already organized, but it's fragmented. You live in an apartment building and you don't know the person who lives 50 feet above you or 50 feet below you, right?
We have to stop talking about real estate. This is the FinTech Festival.
Okay, go.
Let's get back on track on FinTech.
Yeah,
take the same ideas. So we talk about the network state. Fascinating topic. How do traditional FinTech players think about this, reason with it? How do they interact with it? Or are they kind of excluded and now we're going to...
Sure, great question.
Yep.
So, the only thing that's going to be more profitable in a sense than building the next US dollar is building the next United States of America. Okay. And, could you be a seed investor in Singapore or get half of Hong Kong? Now that's possible. If you have territory in the middle of nowhere and you can bring people from anywhere to build something there, right? And you are a FinTech company or you're a bank or something like that, that's now land that has suddenly become much more valuable, right? And all of the money that we've, all this DeFi stuff, all this FinTech stuff, we've built all these pipes for moving enormous sums of capital around the world. And now that lightning can strike in one place, right? And you can just, boom, have the girders come up and like a town or a city form. Nothing I'm describing there is actually not possible.
Do you think they can do that realistically though, with all the regulations that we've heard?
Totally.
With deglobalization?
Yes, and I'll explain
protectionism.
why. So I'll give like 5 or 6 examples.
Yeah.
So first, if you've seen Burning Man, you can see it goes from desert to 70,000 temporary dwellings in a few days, right? If there's no regulation, you actually don't get NIMBY, which is not building, or even YIMBY, which is building skyscrapers and building vertical. You get HIMBY, which is horizontal in my backyard. Okay, so that is basically not yes in my backyard like YIMBY, but horizontal. Horizontal sprawl is actually how cities originally arose. If you go back and look at how the West was won in the USA, people went horizontally like this, right? And that's because a single story building or even like a trailer or something like that, you can move it around, it's flexible, it's the equivalent of like an MVP city. So you can get 70,000 units in like a week if you just took care of those old regulations and it's a desert bed that nobody wants. Places like Mongolia, there's places all around the world that have huge amounts of land that nobody is going to right now that could certainly be for sale, like $1 billion, $100 million. That's actually a lot of money to a lot of small countries. So Burning Man shows it. Another thing is a lot of the shipping container stuff that's being built where you can just boom, land units, snap them together. There's a third.
What's this got to do with FinTech? What's this got to do with,
okay, sure.
How does PayPal's, the banks and all this deal with?
The point is that this is one of the largest possible investment sectors in the world is new towns, cities, even countries. Nothing is at a larger scale of capital than that. So people will say, oh, DeFi, finance, it's not doing anything. It's just people trading with each other. Now you can invest in genuinely productive assets that you can touch and feel that are offline, that are like girders popping out of the ground.
Right. So that's bridging finance and capital to these groups of individuals around the world.
That's right. And look, I'm not an anti-FinTech guy in the sense of obviously being able to wire money around the world instantly and loans, all that kind of stuff is helpful. But the attack on finance has always been, oh, it's just Wall Street, it's not Main Street, oh, it's just gambling, oh, it's just this, it's that. Once it's actually financing real buildings where you can do a time lapse of that town getting built, right? Then it feels real and you're actually taking all of this cloud power and capital that we built and actually doing something that feels good, right? It's like the difference. I mean, look, I love cloud stuff, but Elon is about to launch Starship, right? And so yeah, we have the cloud, but we should also have the stars, you know? And the physical is, you know, that's why I say like cloud first, land last, but not land never. We should take all this cloud power and materialize the cloud on the land. That's what we can do. All this fintech stuff, all the crypto stuff we've done, we can now get really amazing things offline if we coordinate.
Awesome. Let's talk about my favorite topic, which is blockchains.
Okay.
Is this the best use of blockchains?
Yeah, so
what else can you do with them with respect to either nation states or network states?
Yeah, so what are blockchains? Blockchains are digital governments. They're opt-in governments. Basically, just like, you know, Google competed with Microsoft, Bitcoin competes with the Fed, and Ethereum competes with the SEC, okay? And these are not they're not geographically localized, like the Fed is localized to America, SEC is localized to America. They're global, right? Anybody from anywhere, anybody in Argentina, anybody in Poland, in Bangalore, can opt into Bitcoin, opt into Ethereum.
Apart from where they're banned by the state.
Yes, that's right.
By the nation state.
That's right. So it's as if you have this whole new set of cloud governments that are arising that are another layer, right? It's similar to, you know, with the discovery of, quote, the new world, right? All of these new countries were formed that were both in competition and cooperation with the old world, right? So the new world is not the Americas, it's the cloud, right? You should actually think of it, I mean, like how much time a day do you spend looking at a screen?
More than 10.
More than 10, okay? So how many hours, right? So most people, if not half, I mean, actually, I'll just ask the audience here, okay? What percentage of, you know, do you spend more than 25% of your time looking at a screen?
Yes,
yes,
they do.
Okay, right? For most people, it's actually probably on the order of 50%. If it's on the order of 50%, and if you include your watch and your Fitbit, yeah, exactly, your tablets, all this other stuff, right? For most people, the percentage of screen time, in some sense, just has kept rising. And if most of your life is spent looking at a screen, that actually means most of your life future life will be spent in the matrix.
And what does that do to the way people think? Even two people standing next to each other waiting for the bus. Like,
yeah.
can they exist? Are they existing in the same world?
So in the US, they're not. They've got their AirPods in and they're in totally different cognitive worlds. And but the thing about that is that's not a stable state, because the entire concept of the nation state is that you have a group of people, a nation, a tribe, that lives near each other and shares culture implicitly, so therefore they can agree on laws, the state.
They have common beliefs.
They have common beliefs.
Yeah.
If you've got people who have just radically different beliefs, then geography is no longer the way to organize them. You have to start network first. You have to start with not the lands, but the minds, right? And you start with, okay, all these people believe the same thing. How do they get territory? And then they can all talk to each other and they share values. And then it's easy to build things because what they're building is something that everybody nods. Of course, that should be legal. We go and build it, right? Mm-hmm. And that might be, it might be a cathedral. It might be a mosque. It might be like a starship. But everybody agrees in that jurisdiction, this is what we should build.
So you tweeted earlier, the future is TikTok Democrats versus 4chan Republicans.
Yeah.
I don't know what 4chan is. I've never used it.
Okay.
Is that just a US thing, or does that apply more globally? And how does that relate to, you talk about blue people,
right.
red people, gray people.
Yeah.
Your favorite color is gray.
Sure, right. Yes, so basically that's a, kind of a quip, which, TikTok, everybody here probably knows it. 4chan is less maybe well known abroad, but it's quite popular among non-posters in the US and elsewhere. I don't think it's just a US thing. Briefly, it's an English internet thing. If the natural borders of the globe are rivers and mountains, the natural borders of the internet are languages and networks. Yeah. Networks are obvious, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, but languages, the English internet is a thing, the Chinese internet is a thing. The Spanish
Two separate internets. There's no such thing as the internet.
Yes, that's right. Like the Portuguese internet, for example, in a real sense, Brazil is closer to Portugal than it is to Venezuela, even though they're geographically closer because they speak Portuguese together, okay? So once you think of that as actually the true borders of the world in a sense, right, language borders, everybody who speaks English is kind of getting pulled into this American digital civil war to a greater or lesser extent. And the further away you are from them digitally, socially, financially, culturally, the more immunity you have from that, right?
There we go.
But yes, I don't think it's great.
This is something we can go into in a lot more
this is a long
detail,
topic.
But,
that's right, yes.
Balaji, you've done some amazing stuff in the public domain on YouTube. People can look at that. We're running out of time. You are an influencer.
Sure.
you are influencing. But what are your favorite sources of influence? What do you read? What are your sources? Where can people find out more about?
Sure. So I certainly read Twitter. I read Archive, ARXIV, for peer-reviewed papers, but also actually not just preprints rather. And I read GitHub and I look at source code, and I try to keep abreast of technical stuff. I also try to read a lot of stuff in translation. I think if you read the Journal and the New York Times and Washington Post, that actually gets you less signal than reading the Wall Street Journal and CGTN and Russian and Arabic and Indian media. Even if you disagree with all of them, you start to triangulate on what actually happened.
And favorite books or podcasts?
Favorite books? Tim Gower's book, which is The Princeton Guide to Mathematics. It's 800 pages. If you ever had to be in solitary confinement, like you just were in a gym and just had to work out, and we're basically in solitary for a while, you'd take this 800-page book, you could read it every day because it's all of math, okay? So that's like the monk mode book, Princeton Guide to Mathematics. And favorite podcast? There's a lot of them. I don't know. I like Tim Ferriss's podcast. He's a friend, so maybe I'll just go with that. Great.
Tim Ferriss. All right, I think that's all we got time for.
Huberman too is good. Yeah. Good.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.